Do you view him as way more of a building block now, or do you still think this is like just a temporary thing that is very much worthy of celebration, but doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a core part of the next championship caliber Knicks team?
I honestly think I lean towards the latter, because you're going to have to decide whether he can be the best player, or I guess second best player if you assume RJ Barrett or someone else you acquire can be the second best player at minimum on a championship team. Maybe he gets there. I don't know if his timeline and the Knicks' are going to be in lockstep. You can extend him this summer, like for, let's say, 100. It's probably the number they would land at, which seems fair. I don't know what that it makes you. I think it puts a cap on your ceiling, is what I'm getting at. And this year has been fun because the Knicks have been competent again, and I don't want to diminish everything he's doing. LeBron James, and who's the other player? Jokic are the only players in the league leading their teams in points and assists this year. His offense, the Knicks offense is not great, but he has a step back now. Like, he's hitting these tough fades, and we've seen him do it from three too, to where I don't think the 3-point shooting is an anomaly or just a product of easy opportunity. So I want to make it clear, I don't think he's all NBA this year just because of how deep the forward pool is. But he has been probably top 25, top 30 guy this year. He's been spectacular. I just don't know where that gets you looking at the rest of the roster. And you have decisions to make this year around the rest of the roster. Mitchell Robinson, team option. Do you re-sign him, decline it, make him a restricted free agent and pay him now? Or do you pick it up and punt on paying him until later, but know he's going to enter unrestricted free agency next year where there'll probably be more suitors? Alec Burks, Reggie Bullock. I'm not even going to throw Alfred Payton in there, but Nerlens Noel. These are guys that are going
Frank
to be
Ntilikina.
They're not going to pay him, and I'm going to be so upset. If they don't, first of all, I want him, for the record, if they don't extend Frank Ntilikina a qualifying offer to make him a restricted free agency, this podcast is going to riot collectively, not just me, but Adam by extension as well. So unless the Knicks can figure out a way to get that, I think they're probably a player and a half short of being a contender, or like a superstar short. And unless they find a way to get that while keeping Randle and RJ Barrett, I'm not saying you don't keep Randle. I just don't think he's on the iteration of this next title contender. And I'm not saying that they can't get a star via trade, but is Obi Toppin going to pop? Is Emmanuel quickly going to pop? Probably not. RJ Barrett's your best chance at getting to that level of player, and I think you still need another one after that. And I buy into Julius Randle. I feel like I'm denigrating him right now. If he signed a 4-year, $100 million extension, I would say that's fair value for what he's done from a team perspective. It's pretty clear that there's a cap on what you're going to be if he's your best or second best player right now. And considering he's just their best player, that cap exists.
It's also just such funky, typical Knicks timing, isn't it? Like, this team has been an absolute joy to watch. Tom Thibodeau has it playing remarkably hard on the defensive end. Everyone plays with passion and exuberance and really seems to revel in each and every victory, which is so important. Like, this team knows that it's on the rise and it's enjoying that process. But, like, of course, the Knicks unearth Julius Randle as like a legitimate star and knock themselves down the draft standings. Like, they currently sit 18th in the pecking order in mock drafts during the year that the draft is absolutely loaded with top end talent and any spot in the lottery seems beneficial. Look, now is when the Knicks are going to make the playoffs and not have access to one of those top talents. It's just a little too Knicksy, isn't it? That they do all of this at the worst possible time and might cap their ceiling a little bit just because of that bad timing.
Yeah, and there's, I guess, the two pushbacks against that would be they've been very poor and in the past, and they've not gotten those top picks, and so they've been spurned by that. And also, if they finish above 500 after going through, I think it was after the All-Star break, the league's toughest schedule, it was one of the three toughest. If you finish above 500 after that, maybe there's more to plumb with this team. I'm still curious as to RJ Barrett's really because Mitchell Robinson's out, like, he's the only young player on this team getting consistent heavy minutes, just with the sporadic usage of Obi Toppin or Emmanuel quickly. So those are questions. And I know Noah Odage just said Julius Randle greater than Kristaps Porzingis in the chat on Locker Room. He's been better than...
I don't know how you argue otherwise right now.
Right.
Like, the idea of Kristaps is still so intriguing, but like, the idea is only intriguing if it's possible to be realized, and increasingly that looks unlikely.
Right. So even if you're going long term, it gets tough to pick Kristaps there. And with Randle, even if Kristaps just does become the guy who can be close to all defense, and while spacing the floor on offense, and he's been hitting a fair amount of his post-ups looks this year, even though they don't necessarily look pretty. Even if he becomes that player, his influence over the offense is going to be capped because he's not a primary ball handler like Julius Randle is. And I do think, for me specifically, I default to the playmakers in that situation, especially if they're going to have that much responsibility like Julius Randle does. What does get interesting is to, before really diving into the playoff predictions in the East or structure, however, whatever you want to say, revisiting that Kristaps Porzingis trade, because I think everyone has said the Knicks won that trade. Julius Randle was a part of that because they used the cap space they got from the trade to get Julius Randle. I'm not saying that's faulty logic. There's still an element of, look, Kristaps Porzingis could be better long term. Tim Hardaway Jr. is in Dallas. They might keep him, and he's been very useful. What do those Mavericks picks turn into? Is Julius Randle in New York beyond next season? So there still is much TBD here for me, but I do the argument which I had made in the past that the Knicks really fucked up because they did that move for cap space. It wasn't those Mavericks picks. It was for cap space, and they whiffed on all their major signings. They still whiffed on their first choice options, but Julius Randle looks like he could be a mainstay and has been so good this year. So it probably is fair as of right now. If we were to just end the trade right now, it looks like the Knicks got the better end of it, but this is still one of those moves where I think you have to let it play out a little bit longer before you make that final verdict.
It's also going to be such a tough trade to relitigate. I can already see like retroactive gradings of it 5 years from now that just overlook the context. Because ultimately, like the trade goes in the books as the Knicks trading Kristaps Porzingis, Trey Burke, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Courtney Lee to the Dallas Mavericks for DeAndre Jordan, Wesley Matthews, Dennis Smith Jr., and 2 top 10 protected first-round picks in 2021 and 2023. But what that doesn't say is like how it unfolded.
I think is the first pick is unprotected. So that adds value to the trade.
You're right. Yeah, just the latter is top 10 protected, but it's not like that protection was going to matter this year anyway. But either way, like the way the trade unfolded was, that happened on January 31st, 2019, and we learned that Kristaps Porzingis won it out. Like, was it January 30th or was it the morning of January 31st? Like that process happened so fast that the big criticism of the Knicks wasn't just that they were making this move for cap space. It was how quickly it unfolded, because if you shopped him around, you're probably getting a lot more for him.
Right. And I feel confident in saying that they did not adequately canvass the league for a package. And I think it's mostly because they needed a team that was willing to take on the bad money, and they weren't trading Kristaps Porzingis for value back. It was the flexibility in free agency. And that can
the whole
still be
thing
a criticism.
Just so rushed. Yeah.
But to their credit, I think this is more Julius Randle's credit, to be honest with you. He is the best player to come out of that deal so far, pretty decidedly. Kristaps Porzingis has to be number 2. Maybe, I mean, is it Tim Hardaway Jr.?
It might be Tim Hardaway Jr. right now. Yeah, especially given the price point at which you're still having Kristaps on the roster.
So, to wrap it up here, if you're the Knicks, are you keeping Julius Randle long term? And by that I mean, are you signing him to an extension this summer? Or are you waiting, playing it out, seeing where you are in 2022 and evaluating his actual free agency then?
I think I'd sign him to an extension right away. Like having him, it might not produce a championship caliber ceiling, but the only way that's going to happen is by hitting on a later pick in the draft now anyway. Or RJ Barrett just blossoming into an absolute superstar who makes the previous debate about him and John Morant look ridiculous because he's that much better. It's like, I don't know why you would let him go.
Oh, I'm with you. I'd probably try and get him to an extension at this point, and there's a chance that he only costs you more if you let him go to 2022 free agency.
Especially if right now, like there's still this air of uncertainty about like how legitimate and sustainable this level of play is. If he produces like this for another year, and you're looking at a guy who's led the Knicks to back-to-back playoff appearances after decades of futility, that price point is skyrocketing.